In this training, we're going to go over part 2 of preparing for your administrative review, completing your offsite forms. So let's get our ducks in a row. The first thing that you're going to want to do is start each section. So in the previous training, we talked about how you complete section 700. Now we're going to look at all of the other sections. It is completely fine to go in and answer the questions as you know them and then save it, and then you can go back in and update or continue to answer the questions. All these sections will be due by your conference call date, so just keep that in mind when you are setting up that date, that you are giving yourself adequate amount of time to complete these other offsite forms. And just work on it little by little. You don't have to sit in one big stretch and complete all of the offsite forms. That would be a very daunting task. So I would suggest going little by little and answering each question that you know the answer to, and then moving forward to complete the other sections questions. So the first section is section 100, which is your certification and benefit issuance. And in this section, they're going to be looking over how you're processing your free and reduced applications. Do you process them electronically? Are the families filling them out electronically? Do you process them manually? Are they filling out manual? Do you have a combo of the two? This is where you're going to answer those questions and explain your process. ODE is also going to be looking at the time that it takes you to process the paper applications that are sent into your office. So please make sure that you have some sense of how long that takes. It really shouldn't take more than 2 or 3 days for you to process any of the applications that come across your desk. And then from the time that you process that application, how long does it take you to update that student status in your point of sale system or on your student roster? Your direct certification, how long is it taking you to notify the parents once you pull those students? How often are you pulling your direct certification lists? And then likewise, how long is it taking you to provide the deny letter to households once you process an application for a family that isn't eligible for a free or reduced meal? They're also going to look at how you extend benefits. So if you find one student is on the DC list, but then there's other siblings in that household, are you using an address match to match those other students? What is your process for extending those benefits and making sure that you are actually extending those benefits to the other students in that home? And they're also going to want to know who are the individuals that have access to this free and reduced status information. The goal is to always keep this to as tight of amount of people as possible, just so that that information doesn't get shared out with the wrong people. Then you'll move on to section 200, which is verification. They'll first ask if you've completed the verification collection report. That can be found in KERS. So you'll want to make sure that you fill that out. They're going to make sure that you pick the appropriate sample size for your verification. They're going to want to know who's your verifying official, so who's doing that first verifying of the information, and then who's confirming the find. And those cannot be the same person. That needs to be 2 separate people. And this is a checks and balance to make sure that you've done the math and looked at the information provided by the households correctly when you're determining for your reduced status. Then they're going to want to know with your electronic system, is that what you've used for your error-prone applications? So those families that are $100 or less within the free or reduced range, how is that being determined? And then the letters to the household. What is the letter that you're sending to announce when the family has been picked for verification? And then what is the letter that you're sending home to allow them the results of what that was? And how long does that take as well? So it's all just your process of verification from start to finish. As of right now, if you're ahead of the game and working on things in early October, verification is just starting. So this is one of those sections you might have to come back to once you actually complete verification in mid-November. Then you'll move on to section 300. This is your meal counting and claiming. So this is really looking at, do you have a point of sale system? And if you have an electronic system, what system and how is that operating? Or are you doing it manual? What is the backup if you do have an electronic point of sale? Unfortunately, sometimes technology doesn't always work. So what is the plan if you're electronic system would go down, how would you mark the kids that come through and get meals that day? How often do you train your cashiers? So this is our most important person when it comes to ensuring that a reimbursable meal is being claimed. So how often are you training them on what offer versus serve looks like and what needs to be on that tray? What is your process within your department to ensure that there are no double claims, particularly when you run a roster system? So is there somebody checking at the end of the day that Johnny Smith has only been marked once and not twice if you're doing that manual system? A lot of times if you have a point of sale system, they would send an alert if Johnny went through lunch line A and got a lunch, and so that reimbursable lunch was marked. Then if he comes through lunch line B and tries to get another lunch, it would flag that he has already been given a reimbursable meal and you would have to charge him a second meal. So then obviously they're just going to look at what is offer versus serve in your district to ensure that you're following the USDA guidelines. What do you do with incomplete meals? So if a student comes up and they're missing, let's say, a fruit or vegetable, do you encourage them to go back and grab it? Do you just charge them a la carte pricing? What do you do with second meals? So if a student comes through and already gotten one reimbursable meal and they'd like a whole second lunch, what are you doing with that? And then how are you charging adults that come through and participate in the program? We are back around to having to have a charge policy in place. So what does that look like and how is that actually being implemented? I know in many districts, there is a charge policy in the board policies, but then what actually is taking place can sometimes veer away from that a little bit. So you may have a charge policy that says up to X amount of money or X number of meals. Are you actually following that, or are you never denying a student a meal? What they're looking for is the board policy, but then if that is not what you're actually doing, please note what the actual process is, because they will be looking for confirmation of that during your on-site review. Then section 800 is civil rights. This is looking for the date that you did training of your staff on civil rights. This is required to be done every school year. They're going to want to know what is the non-discrimination statement that you are putting on all papers going to the households from food service. And yes, that statement does need to be included on every document that is being sent home from the food service department. They're going to look for what was your public release. Did you put information about the free and reduced meal on the school website? Did you alert the local newspaper? How are you getting it out to the community that your district is participating in the national school and or breakfast programs? What are you doing with limited English proficiency students? So, do you have a menu program that can translate the menu into other languages? Do you have a translator within the district that can help with that? How do you help those students navigate the lunch? Then do you have a civil rights complaint form? Hopefully none of us have to worry about this, but you do actually have to have the documents in place just in case for whatever reason you would need this at any time. So if you do not have this, the USDA does have a really good template that you can use and then modify to fit your district's needs. There's a question that asks how you help students with disabilities. So is there an aide that comes down with the student to help them navigate the lunch line? Does one of the food service staff help the student navigate through the lunch line? That's kind of what they're looking for to ensure that that student has the optimal experience coming down and getting a meal. And then the very last section in section 800 just wants to know how the district is collecting racial and ethnic data. So for many school districts, you might have what's called an EMIS coordinator, and this person is likely gathering that information when students enroll. So you can reach out to that person within your district to get that information. The next section is section 900, the SFA on-site monitoring. This is kind of the yearly, our own quasi audit that we do of each of our sites, just to make sure that everything is running smoothly and there aren't any things that need to be addressed or modified to be in compliance with the National School Meals Programs. There is a form for breakfast and there is a form for lunch. So if your site is doing breakfast and lunch, you would have to fill out one of each of those, and you would need to observe a breakfast, lunch, or a breakfast period and a lunch period, and then fill out the form accordingly. And you'll need one of those separate for each individual building within your district. And that's due by February 1st of every year. So again, this may be something, if your review is before this, you may have to complete this a bit earlier than you might typically tend to complete these forms. Section 1000 is your local school wellness policy. So you're going to want to provide a copy of your current wellness policy. If it is on your school website, I would go ahead and add that web address in there as well. It does ask for that if there's an easy online, as we kind of all are moving to a very virtual world. How are families finding out about the wellness policy? How are you informing the public? So if it's on the school website, that's great. Is it going out into a newsletter? Is it getting put into a call from the superintendent? How are you communicating that out? They're also going to want to know when and how the policy is reviewed and updated. So please make sure that you have a copy of your most recent assessment. They're going to also want to know who are the stakeholders and how do you alert somebody that they could partake in the wellness policy committee within your school district. So they're just going to want to know that. And again, make sure that you have a copy of your most recent wellness assessment. Again, there are tools online that you can use. If you haven't updated your wellness policy recently, those are available to you as well. Then section 1100 is smart snacks. So going back to the good old what's being sold outside of that reimbursable meal. So please make sure that you update your smart snacks binder. You should have a printout of the smart snack calculator for every smart snack item that you serve to show that you did run the item through the calculator and that it is compliant and can be sold as a smart snack. And then also, who is tracking these smart snacks? Is it just the food service director or supervisor? Are the building managers allowed to run their own smart snacks calculator to ensure that what they're serving does meet those smart snack guidelines? Then section 1200 is your professional standards. So this is looking at all of the training that you're doing for yourself and with your staff. So they're first going to ask for your staff breakdown. So how many full-time people do you have and how many part-time people do you have? Full-time depends on your school district, what they consider that. So that would be for your school district in the contract. Who is considered within your district full-time? Doesn't necessarily have to be 40 hours a week. Food safety training, they're going to ask that, especially if you're a new food service director. Have you had the mandatory food safety training that is required? For the food service director, have you met the hours or are you on track to meet your hours for the year? Again, more than likely your review will take place sometime in the middle of the school year. So you can share any planned trainings that you have. I know most of us get plenty of hours. So probably by the time they do your review, you've probably already met your hours for the year. Likewise with your staff training, if you have PD days kind of sprinkled throughout the school year, I would just go ahead and write down the PD days that are upcoming and how many hours of training you intend. It doesn't have to be subject specific or anything like that, just to show that you do have a plan for your staff to meet all of their hours for the year. And then just making sure that you're tracking that somewhere so that there is a log of each individual member of your team and what trainings they've completed and how much time that took. Section 1600 is the school breakfast and summer meals section. So this is pretty brief. So what they're looking for here is just the flyer that went out at the beginning of the school year to say, yes, in our district, we're serving breakfast. It's at this building at this time, just so that it's specific when and where it is so that the families are aware. Likewise for summer feeding, even if your district doesn't participate, how are you sharing out, because you are responsible to share out with your families where they can go to get meals over the summer when you're not actively serving breakfast and lunch. So it could be within your district if you're participating. So again, you'd want to tell them when, where they can go to get those meals, or if they need to go to a neighboring school district, you can put that information on your school website as well with the address and times of those meal services. And then they're just going to ask you to check if you're running any other federal programs. So those would be the after school snack program, the seamless summer option, the fresh fruit and vegetable program, and the special milk program. And it's just a little checkbox that you check if you are offering those programs. So what are our next steps once we get these offsite forms? I hope this kind of calms your nerves. Doesn't have to be a tedious, overwhelming process. Take it little by little at a time. You will have your conference call with your assigned specialist. And they may ask for additional items. So just start working on those and get those uploaded to PERS in the appropriate section as soon as you possibly can. Then they'll tell you what site or sites they are going to come to. So that's where you'll go back and complete section 600, which will be our next training. And that's site specific, looking at all of your menu information. And then again, just upload the requested menu information for the site or sites that are going to be reviewed this time. But that's this part of the training. So the next, we will again talk about all of the different items you will need for that section 600 for your menus. Thank you.